Hello and welcome to this special briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I am Jonathan Beck, Director of Content. Our guest today is Dr. Ilana Shpaizman, a lecturer in the Department of Political Studies at Bar-Ilan University, where she has been since 2017. Shpaizman co-directs the Israeli Agendas Project, part of the Comparative Agendas Project Network. Her research focuses on policy processes, agenda setting, and gradual institutional changes, with notable publications on Israeli and American policy. Her work earned her several accolades, including Best Paper Awards from the Israeli Social Policy Association and the Social Policy Association. Hello, Dr. Shpaizman, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
So our topic today is really in the works. There's been chatter quite a long while about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wanting to bring Gallant into his coalition and also to remove Gallant, his defense minister, who he has already fired more than a year ago in the so-called Gallant night during the judicial reform protests. Back then, Gallant was fired and then reinstated within a day, and since then, his position has been kind of shielded inside Likud, even though he has allowed himself quite a lot of leeway in criticizing Netanyahu. Can you explain to us why the Prime Minister is doing this at this time?
Well, Gallant has been the opposition to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Not necessarily because they disagree on very substantial policy issues, but because Gallant believes that we should proceed to a hostage deal, and Netanyahu as it seems, doesn't want a hostage deal. And we saw it a couple of weeks ago when they had the cabinet meeting, and Gallant said that they should not vote on the Philadelphia route, and Netanyahu insisted on it. So they personally disagree. They personally dislike each other ever since last year, but they also disagree on the most essential issue, which is the hostage deal and a ceasefire. And another essential issue they disagree on is about the legislation that will allow ultra-Orthodox young men not to go to the army.
So the so-called draft law is a major obstacle, I know, and it's been a major obstacle for many coalitions and many governments in the past. Do we know, I mean, has Sar indicated that he's going to pave Netanyahu's way to, I don't know how to put this, to dissolving the current situation and continuing the non-draft of the ultra-Orthodox without any legislative changes, or alternately to pass a new law? Has Sar given such a guarantee?
Well, he didn't give any guarantee, and he knows it's very risky politically for him to give such guarantee. However, we should remember that Sar was in the government until a couple of months ago, and he said then that one of the reasons he left the government is because he objected the draft law. So he said that if he agreed for the draft law, perhaps he could have stayed in the government. So we can conclude from that his entrance to the government, if it will happen, will include some agreement to some compromises on the draft law, which Gallant objects.
Okay, now we obviously know Netanyahu's reasons for making this change because, you know, he's basically running away from a trial, and this is another way to extend the life of the coalition and the life of the government. What's in it for Sar, who has positioned himself as a right-wing politician who is in opposition to Netanyahu and Likud? What's he to gain from now entering the government under Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister?
Well, this is an interesting question because when you think about it, he has nothing to gain. He only has things to lose because his potential voters will look at him and they'll see someone who objected Netanyahu and now is going back to his government. However, maybe one of the reasons we can think of is that Sarah looks at the polls and they're not very favorable towards him. He cannot gain any significant support from the public. And the position of the Minister of Defense is a very prestigious position. It's not only prestigious, but to be a Minister of Defense basically signals that you are ready to be a prime minister. This is the way it goes in Israel. So I think Sar believes that if he'll be the Minister of Defense, and if he'll be a successful Minister of Defense, then when Netanyahu retires, and it will happen at one point or another, he might be the one replacing him. Sar wants to be a prime minister. This is not something that, this is something that is known for everyone, and I think it's something he said before as well. So his way to the prime ministership doesn't go through the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Interior, which post he held before, but through the Ministry of Defense.
Okay, we know that Gallant. The truth is, I'm not up to date on the most recent polls. That, despite of everything you said about like the defense minister being, let's say the hallway through which you enter the door of the premiership, it doesn't look like Gallant himself has such aspirations. And I think in polls over the past year, especially also since the so-called Gallant night, he has enjoyed sort of protected status. I mean, he's enjoying a lot of public trust in managing the war, even though, in fact, he's probably, let's say, as responsible as the defense echelon and as the prime minister for every failing that happens. So in replacing, doesn't Sar hurt himself by replacing a politician who is considered popular? Let's put it in so many words.
When you say considered popular, you should ask yourself, considered by whom popular? Because what Gallant had done, he became popular among the protesters. The protesters who object Netanyahu and his government, they see him as maybe the only responsible adult in this government. However, when you ask Netanyahu's base, which is the audience Netanyahu constantly targeting, he is not that popular. He seems as someone who is betraying Netanyahu, who is not supporting him enough. And so this signals the base that I want loyal people. And I think the conversation now is that whether Sar can be loyal or not, which is a big question. So Gallant is not going to lose his popularity, but this is not a popularity of the entire public. It's a popularity of specific group, very large group, but it's not Netanyahu's base. And I also think that Netanyahu's considerations are not only about the popularity of the move, but the sake of his coalition. And if Sar indeed can compromise on the draft law, and which will save the coalition, because at the moment, the one thing that endangers the coalition is the draft law. So it's worth Netanyahu to enter Sar and also enlarge his coalition. So the government will be much more secure.
Does Netanyahu have to gain from it in the sense that a defense minister Sar would be let's say, a heavier counterweight to Interior Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who also has a special role in the defense ministry in Judea and Samaria? Can he give him let's say, a convenient finger in cabinet votes against, the religious Zionism, which is considered a bit of the bad boy of the coalition?
I don't know if he thinks that is going to be some contra. We should remember that Sar is very right-wing ideologue. That means that he is not objecting what Bezalel Smotrich does in the Ministry of Defense. Most likely will support his activities. He is very, very dovish. This is for once. And we also didn't hear Sar's any expressions regarding Ben-Gvir. On the contrary, Sar expressed his discontent from the way Gallant is running the war. He said we need to be more decisive, we should start war in the north, we should respond more firmly to Iran and maybe to Yemen. So this is not going to be counter to Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who also push for more decisive military action in all the fronts.
Even though Now the question rises whether Saar said all those things just because he was in opposition, or is this his genuine political belief? I mean, from his perspective, is he going to the defense ministry in order to bring a real defense agenda of his own that intends to shift the course of the war? I mean, I know he said as much in interviews, but pardon the cynicism, can we see this as more than a political move proper, or is there substance?
Well, this is only a political move. So maybe Saar has substance and has aspirations, but as we saw in the last almost a year, the one person who decides how the war is going to continue is Netanyahu. So Saar might have aspiration, and I believe he has his own agenda regarding the way we should run the war, but I'm not sure Netanyahu is going to let him to realize this agenda. So from Saar point of view, maybe it has some substance. From Netanyahu point of view, it's everything is instrumental. He does some reshuffle, he fires Gallant, he gains perhaps some support from the base, he gains a broader coalition, only instrumental, no substance.
I'll soon move to questions from reporters. I wanted to ask you, in a regular scenario, like just to put our listeners and also myself in context, if Saar now joins, how long does this government have until its natural expiry?
The government entered office at the end of 22, December 22. The elections were in October 22, so we have until October 26.
So we have a whole year. And Gallant is fully aware, of course, as you know, a leader of his own party, that entering under Netanyahu's wing, so to speak, now is going to limit his capability to, let's say, shine on his own.
I think Saar doesn't want to shine on his own anymore. He realized that it's useless. He tried that for several election campaigns, and he actually failed. So he's trying to go back to the Likud, where he can shine. And if Likud goes back to power after election, he's going to be a minister. That's for sure.
Okay. Now, considering the stuff that you said about, the hostage families and basically some kind of reincarnation, in a sense, of the people who were protested in the streets and lit bonfires, etc., when Gallant was fired the first time. Do you think this is likely to happen a second time? Also, especially just today, I think Gallant told Amos Hochstein, if I'm not sure, someone else, that the time for a diplomatic arrangement in the north is running short, and we are heading to a major war. Meaning, Gallant as well is not in the camp of hostage deal now. So, will those protesters be out on the street again? And if so, will this just be to use Gallant as a sort of political puppet against Netanyahu? Because he doesn't, in fact, stand for what they substantively demand, which is, a deal as soon as possible and at all costs.
Well, first of all, I think we should know that the hostage family already said that today in the evening, we're going to arrange a large protest in front of Saar House to demand him not to enter the government, because they believe that once Gallant will be replaced, any chance of a hostage deal is going to be moved off the table. And yes, Gallant said that the time frame and the window of opportunity for negotiation and some diplomatic effort in the north is closing down. However, it didn't close yet. And I think all the experts agree that a ceasefire in the south will mean some kind of a ceasefire in the north as well. So as long as we don't have some peace in the south, or I don't know, peace, but at least quiet, we won't have it in the north as well. And no hostage deal. So Gallant is not a dog, okay? He was the one who pushed for more decisive reaction for military operation in the north a couple of days after October 7th. However, now when he looks at the situation, he realizes that we have to save the hostages, and he said it more than once, he and the entire defense system. So yes, he may be not as dovish as the hostage families, but he is not for a total war in all fronts, which Sar is the one pushing for.
I see. I have another question for a reporter. Before, in the past, Sar was considered like the face or the leader of the Anyone But Bibi movement. I don't know if this reporter is characterizing it correctly, but he certainly was one of the leaders of the Anyone But Bibi sentiment. How will the public now accept him going back to Likud? And more importantly, there are major MKs in Likud that used to see him as a colleague and is now their competition. So will they just welcome him back with open arms?
So we need to remember some things about the relations between Sar and Netanyahu. Sar and Netanyahu are not friends. Sar was elected in the primaries of the Likud many years ago. He was #1 in the 2015 elections. However, after Netanyahu. However, he did not receive any ministerial position, which is really weird, something that almost never happens. Netanyahu decided that he doesn't want any competition, and he put him to be committee chair. And then Sar left Likud, saying that he cannot work with Netanyahu, accused him of being a liar and other horrible things. So, and then he was seen as someone who's protecting democracy, which was what he said last year during the protests, and going against Netanyahu, saying that he knows the real Netanyahu, he knows who he is. So this move he's doing now is very confusing to the public who supports Sar, because he was seen as someone with dignity, saying something and standing behind it, and ideologist. And now we see that this is not the way it is. But we should remember that the polls were not favorable. Every surveys made since October 7 and before, he did not pass the electoral threshold. So he's most likely will find himself outside of politics. So if he wants to remain a politician, the only way for him to do it is through Likud and not through other party.
However, correct me if I'm wrong, he will need to rerun in the Likud primary, right?
Yes, he will, but two buts. First, Netanyahu has the ability to place people without primaries. We saw it with Amichai Shikli, Idit Silman, and everyone else who betrayed their parties and moved to the Likud. So if Netanyahu wants, he can do it. Second, I'm not sure that he will run in the primaries. The Likud voters will not elect him because, again, if we compare him to other MKs in the Likud, he looks like a decent person with firm ideology. And there are many Likud voters who still look for kind of stuff. If there are Likud members who can actually vote in the primaries, they might give him their votes.
Okay. Do you see any, I know it's early to talk, do you see any future in which Sar, basically in a while from now, rejoins Likud and dismantles his current political organization, which he established basically just to leave Likud, Do you see him like folding back into the camp and reestablishing himself in the party with the primary system?
Of course. Yes, of course. Everyone who joins the Likud just say bye to their own party. We should remember Gallant is not from the Likud. He started from Kulanu, from Moshe Kahlon. And then he moved to the Likud and became part of the Likud. So yes, it's much better to be part of a large party, established party, than to be part of a very small party.
Okay, before we conclude, can you say something about maybe Yoav Gallant's political aspirations? Because that's always been, to me personally, a sort of enigma. He's almost this rare politician who actually came to do his job, and it looks like he doesn't have actual political. He either lacks the charisma or the political aspirations, but it doesn't look like he's vying for the top role. I mean, it doesn't look like, from Netanyahu's perspective, Gallant was any sort of threat on the prime ministerial position. Unlike Sar, am I correct in my assumption here?
I think so. I don't think Gallant had any aspiration to be a prime minister. He had aspiration to become the Minister of Defense. So he was the Minister of Education, before that the Minister of Housing, and before that the Minister of Immigration. And his entire aspiration were to become the Minister of Defense. He doesn't want to be a prime minister. He doesn't need to be a prime minister. He's an army person. He came from the army. He wants to command the army in a political way. So he is not a threat in that sense. He's a threat in another sense because Netanyahu likes to position himself and describe himself as the protector of Israel, as minister of security. And then when someone like Gallant comes and enjoys popularity and trust, this is something that undermines Netanyahu's image as Mr. Security. However, given the current situation, I think after October 7, no one thinks that Netanyahu is Mr. Security, so it's a bit of a paranoidic belief.
So I'll ask one last question, which is kind of assumptive, and you can feel free to not respond if it's not political. Do you think we should expect Netanyahu to sort of, right from the get-go, maybe undermine or portray the Sar as just the defense minister when Netanyahu is the Mr. Defense? I mean, is he gonna try to put wind in his sails or put brakes on him so as to aggrandize his own position as the main force leading this war, etc.?
Well, first it depends.
And more importantly, how will Sar also react to such behavior if it happens? Because Sar is also a veteran politician. He's not like Gallant. He has higher political aspirations.
He has higher political aspiration and also higher political skills. Sar is a very good politician. He knows how to talk to people, how to make alliances, and we shouldn't undermine his abilities and skills in the political world. Now, as a Minister of Defense, I think Netanyahu will try to shift the blame. We're in the blame games now. So Netanyahu is going to try and shift the blame to Sar as the Ministry of Defense, regardless of the result. If there's going to be a war in the north, he's going to be blamed for. If it's not going to be a war in the north, he's going to be blamed for. And as long as Sar will go with Netanyahu, perhaps you'll let him make some moves, but if he goes against him, he will openly criticize him. Netanyahu has proved that he has no loyalty to anyone, so we shouldn't expect anything different, but I think Sar knows that. So if he's entering the Ministry of Defense, he probably thinks that he can do something and he has a plan. I don't know if it's going to work, but he probably thought of something.
Okay, I keep saying it's the last question, but this is going to be really my last one. Gallant, does he enjoy any, are there going to be people in Likud in the back benches that are going to be sad to see him leave, or is he kind of alone in the party?
He's alone. There's no one in the Likud who says anything against Netanyahu. We saw it in the last 11 months. There's no Likud. There's Netanyahu, and all the rest are just yes men. So he's alone, totally alone. Perhaps people will think it, and maybe they'll call him privately and say something. That I believe this will happen, but nothing openly or publicly, no.
And as a free agent, is Gallant going to be hot political merchandise? I mean, he's proven himself to be, at the very least, kind of to the point and practical and not really a person who plays politics who come to do the work. Does he have a place in Israeli politics outside Likud, or is he going to just retire, you think?
It all depends on how the shots are going to be made when the elections are going to be announced. Which parties are going to run? Is there going to be some right-wing party, which is a new right-wing party, something led by Bennett, for instance, and then he has room there? Maybe he'll choose to stay in the Likud. But it all depends on how the parties are going to be formed once the election is going to be announced, and this is too early to say something about it now.
Okay, so I would like to thank you, Dr. Shpaizman, for agreeing to meet with us at such short notice. Of course, everything we talked about is still, potential, even though indications are going this way. And I hope we can meet again when stuff comes to pass and we'll see the results of the things we talked about. I would just like to remind everyone that this briefing will be on our YouTube channel later today. And I would like to thank Mati Sakal, my colleague at JPC, for facilitating this briefing. And again, to thank you, Dr. Shpaizman, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.